back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with them three.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time we're going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. I am, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 13th day of the month of January. And if you happen to be watching this podcast on social media right now, whether it be via Facebook and or Instagram, it's the first time that you're seeing me in studio in about a month now, and good to be back in here rather than worrying if one of my family members or one of my pets is going to walk through in the background. Plus, got to check what's going on with my microphone at home because the quality was not the greatest in the world last week, did not live up to my standards. And standards is something that we're going to talk about a lot today, because you watch the beginning of these NFL playoffs, it feels like certain players, certain franchises are not living up to standard. And we're going to give you some thoughts on that, give you some thoughts on the college football playoff as well, and mix in some interesting thoughts on the coaching search going on in the NFL, as well as one of the biggest known secrets finally coming to an end in the NFL yesterday. But of course, it's that great time of year that I look forward to all the time, considering my football team sucks and I need something to keep my interest, something to be excited about. With Wild Card Weekend this past week, with 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and 1 taking place tonight with the Rams and Vikings playing out in Glendale, Arizona. But as excited as we are about the playoffs, as much as you want to celebrate the playoffs, there's definitely some people that are looking at this and saying they could have put forward a better performance and are going to have a whole off seasoning of questioning that they're going to have to deal with now. Because it's one thing to lose in the playoffs. It happens all the time. There's going to be 13 disappointed teams and fan bases once this postseason is done. There's only one that gets to hold the holy grail of the Lombardi Trophy above their head and celebrate ultimately at the end of the day. But on the same front, you want to put forward a great performance. You want to be able to leave it all out on the field so that even if you go down in defeat, you have no regret. You have nothing where you're looking back on the season and saying, oh, I should have done this differently, or I really let my team down. That's something that Justin Herbert is feeling today. Let down. Feeling that he disappointed his team because the Chargers had a chance to race out ahead of the Texans Saturday afternoon. Had a chance to grasp full control of this game. Had an opening 10-play field goal drive that should have set them up well, being the road team and surprisingly being a favored road team, which you don't see every day in the playoffs. And they had the opportunity right in front of them on the fact that the Texans have looked shaky offensively for the last couple of months. Take advantage of the fact that Houston was giving them opportunities, including fumbling the ball on their first play from scrimmage. but the Chargers were held to just a field goal there. And if you're a Texans fan, you're thinking, wow, we kept it to a 6-point game here, even with the fact that the Chargers had a 10-play drive to start the game, were able to get the ball in good territory on our initial fumble by Mechie. And the Texans were able to capitalize on what was probably the sloppiest day of Justin Herbert's career. A quarterback that threw all of 3 interceptions during the regular season, went a 3-month span without throwing an interception, and when it came time for the biggest moment, when it came time to shine, he let his team down by throwing 4 interceptions in this game. And he's a guy that we have hailed as being one of the top quarterbacks in this league, have hailed as being one of the futures of this league. And people kept saying, oh, if he just gets the right coaching. Because you look at the coaching that he's had since coming into the league, whether it be Anthony Lynn, whether it be Brandon Staley. If he just gets a real legitimate NFL coach, and he got that this year with Jim Harbaugh. And these are the kind of moments that you're supposed to capitalize on. These are the kind of moments that you're supposed to shine on. But when you're given great field position by the Texans to start and only come away with a field goal, and then you're extremely turnover prone with the football, especially in the second half, throwing 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter at a time when it was still a game. It was still a competitive game here, but he gets picked off by Stingley, and that comes on a drive 4 plays after throwing the pick 6 to Murray. Even when you're thinking, oh, maybe the Chargers still have a shot here. Maybe they still have a chance here, being the fact that the Texans weren't doing anything overly impressive at that point. They weren't just blowing their doors off. And as we've seen in the NFL, leads can come and go in a heartbeat. They get the 70-yard touchdown from Herbert to McConkey, I get the extra point blocked and taken back for a 2-point conversion. It felt like a day of whatever can go wrong will go wrong for the Chargers, and a lot of it is going to be placed at the feet of Justin Herbert when it's all said and done. How can it not be? You're paid $50+ million a year, and look at his postseason history now. 2 years ago, he lost the game to the Jaguars, in which they had a 27-0 lead in the first half, and were not able to capitalize on that. And now he has a game in which he throws 4 interceptions after being nearly perfect during the regular season. He really screwed the pooch here for this Chargers team. And you give the Texans a lot of credit here, because they were a home underdog in this game. Had a lot of people, including yours truly, not believing in them, and came off very sloppy early in this game. But C.J. Stroud was able to keep the crew together, was even able to overcome some of his own errors. You look at the play that really seemed to get the Texans going, really seemed to get them a little bit of momentum. It was that 3rd down play in which he muffed the snap and was able to still turn it into a conversion, able to still run upfield and keep his team within the distance of a Charger team that seemingly had no answers from. But now it's a severe step up in competition, because they're going to be facing a squad that does not make a lot of mistakes. A team that, unless you're a fan of theirs, you're probably hoping that they go down in painful defeat, but have been that dark cloud that hangs over the rest of the league for the last several years, that being the Kansas City Chiefs. And got a full week to prepare for them coming up now at 4:30 on Saturday, but a very difficult end for the Chargers and a good continuation of growth here, I think, for C.J. Stroud, because he's missing so many weapons offensively. He had a lot of people doubting him, but 2 years in a row now, he's won at least one playoff game, and he'll get a second chance, that is, at trying to prove himself against the Kansas City Chiefs coming up on Saturday. But what had to be the more demoralizing loss team-wise was the Pittsburgh Steelers' performance on Saturday night, because the final score may read 28-14, but let's face it, anybody who watched this game knew that this was a one-sided shellacking. This was a one-sided ass-kicking by the Baltimore Ravens on the Steelers. When you run for over 300 yards against an opposition, when you keep them to all of 2 first downs in the first half, when you have a drive in the first half that is 13 consecutive running plays, whether it be with your quarterback Lamar Jackson or your beast of a running back in Derrick Henry. That is just an overwhelming beatdown. That is just an overwhelming ass-kicking by one team. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a performance where you look yourself in the mirror and you question your pride. You question your manhood. Giving up 300 yards on the ground, being down 21-0 on the road. It's one thing if you do that against the Kansas City Chiefs or the Texans or some other team, but you're facing your division rival for the third time this year, a team that raced back and stole the division away from you while you were going through a 5-game losing streak, and seemingly had no offense whatsoever in the first half. It seems like Russell Wilson and company just decided to only show up in the second half of this game. And you start to look at Pittsburgh and you realize they're in one of the worst kind of situations that you can be. Not just with the 5-game losing streak and losing in the postseason again, something that has become a very familiar story for them as they've now lost 6 consecutive playoff games. They haven't won a playoff game since 2015. We're talking 10 years here without a Steelers playoff victory. And this is a franchise that has higher aspirations, a franchise that has 6 championships to its history. And they haven't won a playoff game in 10 years. But you look at them, and the problem with them is, see, they're not bad enough to be a high draft pick. They're always good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to win playoff games. And because of them making the playoffs all the time, they're usually drafting somewhere from that 16 to 23 range. They haven't drafted in the top 10 in over 20 years, probably since the Big Ben draft. And now you look at, with not being able to draft up there, they can't find their franchise quarterback. They're going through the retread mode of taking guys on 1-year stopgap deals, and it's not allowing them to move forward as a franchise when you consider how bad the ending of the Ben Roethlisberger era turned out to be. The fact that Kenny Pickett did not turn out to be their long-term answer at quarterback. And then they were so flip-floppy between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields this year. It brings the question, is it time for a change in Pittsburgh? And when I bring that question up, I'm looking squarely at one person, and I hate saying this because he's my favorite coach in the NFL, but is it time for a separation between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin? He's been there 18 years, not had a losing season at all, has managed at worst to have them being a 9-8 or 8-8 back when it was a 16-game schedule team each and every single year, and even have them in place to at worst be competing for a playoff spot going into week 17 and 18 every single year. But this does not feel like a team that is on the cusp of competing for a championship. It feels like a team that the message, especially with that defense, has gone stale. And that's the most surprising part of this. A defense that has people like TJ Watt, people like Cam Hayward, who I know he was battling some injuries on Saturday night, Patrick Queen, amongst many others. And they just have a no-show performance like that. Is it time to make a change for change's sake? Remember, years back, the same thing happened with Andy Reid in Philadelphia. Things grew stale there. The message grew stale. He knew that, yeah, they can continue making the playoffs, but they weren't going anywhere as a franchise, and both sides felt that it was time to separate. And he's had a second life, had a second career in Kansas City. Could Mike Tomlin be thinking that? Or with how restless Steeler fans are becoming, realizing that he always says the standard is the standard, but what is the standard right now? Their standard has always been winning championships, not just making it to the playoffs and getting knocked out in the wild card round. And this is going to be something that is extremely fascinating to watch here, and something that I think we'll get a resolution on within the next week to 10 days, because you know there's plenty of teams out there that have a head coaching opening, teams that would kill from Mike Tomlin, teams that would be willing to fork over first-round draft picks from Mike Tomlin. Could he look out there and say, you know what, it's time for me to make a change. I'm 52 years old. I still got a lot of football coaching ahead of me. It might be in our team's best interest if I move on to a different place, a different avenue in my career. So that's going to be fascinating to watch, and fascinating to see what the Steelers decide to do and what they could possibly get for him if they were willing to trade him to somewhere he would like to move on to, if he does feel it's time to move on. And maybe it is just time for change for the sake of change. All right, a lot more to get to on the NFL playoffs as we go on here. Also give you some thoughts on the college football playoff, a big announcement that was made as far as NFL coaching hirings yesterday, give you some thoughts on the recent coaching search with the Jets and GM search. So a lot to get to over the next about 40 minutes or so here. Glad you guys could join me as always. And like I tell you, each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, hell, put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
So now the Ravens move on to what will be a very familiar foe for them in these playoffs, the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills team that, just like the Ravens, is looking to overcome a demon that has been hanging over them for a long time, that being the Kansas City Chiefs. And that these two teams are going to have to go to an absolute war now to get to that ultimate quest, get to that ultimate goal of upending Mahomes and the Chiefs. Buffalo, it didn't start off pretty for them yesterday against the Denver Broncos as the Broncos came down and scored on their opening drive, but then that Bills defense shut them down for the rest of the game, left them scoreless on their final 7 drives of the game, and Josh Allen just did Josh Allen things, was very methodical and Superman-like in his dominance over the Broncos, including that really crazy, insane play on 4th down in the second half to Ty Johnson, which is a play that you have to see to believe, because it's still a 1-score game there. And I think this was the play that, even though it was still within reach, kind of took the heart and soul away from Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, because it's a 4th down play. Josh Allen is scrambling around trying to find somebody open, and he finds Ty Johnson open in the end zone, sliding to the ground, just barely makes the catch with his knee touching the ground before his feet touch the chalk. It was as incredible a catch as you're going to see considering the circumstances, and they just had a well-balanced attack. We used to talk about the Bills and look at them as a one-trick pony, where it was Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs, and seemed like he was locked in on him all game long. But with Diggs gone, they've gotten the running game more involved, have found a running back in James Cook who has given them a multi-dimension weapon in that offense. And when you have the ball for 40-plus minutes, it's going to demoralize any team, no matter how good they are defensively. And the Broncos were one of the best teams defensively in the league this year. But 40 minutes on the field, that is going to exhaust anybody. And you got to be able to still run the football this coming Sunday against this Ravens team and not just so willingly give up on it, especially when you consider, now the Bills defense is not going to probably go out there and give up 300 yards rushing. But you've got to look at it as the longer I have my offense out here, the less chance I have of my defense getting tired out by Lamar and Derrick Henry. I can't have us getting burnt and run all over like we were in week 4 when the Ravens routed the Bills. It's going to be a fun matchup, going to be a fun, should we say, main event to cap off the divisional round weekend this coming Sunday when the Baltimore Ravens travel up there to Buffalo. I think Philadelphia Eagle fans need to calm down, need to just be at ease today. Because I've seen a lot of unrest, a lot of worries on social media the last couple of days from Eagle fans about the fact that Jalen Hurts hadn't played in about 3 weeks. You're going up against a Packer team in Jordan Love, who at times has shown he's one of the best young quarterbacks in this league. And while it wasn't pretty, it wasn't one of the most dominating offensive displays in the world by the Eagles yesterday, there were 2 very important things you came away from this victory with. A, the win and move on. And B, how great your defense was. Now, you did lose a key member of it in Nakobe Dean to a knee injury, and he's likely going to miss the rest of this postseason. The important thing that you did was you survived in advance. With the time that Jalen Hurts missed, you had to expect it wasn't going to be a pretty display. It wasn't going to be him just rolling back out there after 3 weeks off and throwing for 300-plus yards against this Packer defense. The Packer defense came to play. The Packer defense was really the only thing about the Packers that you look at and say, that was impressive yesterday. That was something that we should be overly concerned about. Yeah, Josh Jacobs had his moments, including one run he had at the end of the third quarter where it seemed like he pushed off the entire Eagles defense to scrap his way toward the goal line and give even a fighting chance for the Packers heading into the fourth quarter. But your defense was not just dominant, but it also took advantage of something that has to be very glaring for the Green Bay Packers. And I know the Packers late in this game were without their three best wide receivers, with the fact that they were already without Christian Watson, lost Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed during the game due to injuries, and lost members of their offensive line as the game went on, including center Josh Myers. But you cannot, if you're the Packers, continue to allow Jordan Love to make some of the immature mistakes in this game that he's made all year long. And I think he's a big reason why you look at the Packers now and say, yeah, you had a very good year. You were the third best team in what was the best division in the sport this year. You won 11 games and got to the postseason. But at times, Jordan Love, I think, has gotten by on just talent alone, has gotten by on just wanting to be that gunslinger down the field, and hasn't really matured as a quarterback. Especially when you look at the interception by Zach Bond in the second quarter. That was a time where you have less than a minute to go in the half. You still have a chance to get some points on the board before halftime, knowing that the Eagles were going to have the ball to start the second half. And he pretty much threw the ball to Bond like he was on his own team. I don't know what the read was there. I don't know who he was looking for on that play. But it was poor judgment by Jordan Love, thinking that he could just gut it in there. I don't blame him so much for the interception by Darius Slay, because I thought that was just Slay making a great play down the field. And plus, it was still so early in that game that you're not going to get on him too much. But we're seeing too many times with Jordan Love in key spots him make these gunslinger mentality like moves. And that's a reason why, yeah, they had the great season, but they didn't beat anybody. You look at 0-2 against the Lions, 0-2 against the Vikings, and now, including the postseason, 0-2 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Jordan Love needs to grow up. He's as talented as any quarterback in the league. But sometimes, and this was said by the former Jet head coach Robert Saleh, something that Zach Wilson never got through his brain. And I don't want to compare Jordan Love to Zach Wilson. Jordan Love is a more than capable starting quarterback in this league, while Zach Wilson will have to fight to be on someone's practice squad next year. But sometimes it's best just to play boring football. Yeah, there's going to be the moments where you can have the electric plays, but play boring football. That can be winning football. That can be setting yourself up for the winning plays. And a team that set themselves up for the winning plays on Sunday night was the Commanders, taking advantage of some not-so-glorious moments for the Buccaneers, including what turned out to be the most costly one of them all, that fumble by Baker Mayfield. And I hate that Baker's season ends like that. I hate that that's going to be the last thing we think about with Baker Mayfield from this year, because he had a phenomenal year. He had a remarkable season in leading this Buccaneers team to the NFC South, overcoming so many injuries on that offense, including a month without Mike Evans at times. But the fumble that he had in the second half is what allowed the Commanders to stay in this game, because Tampa's defense just stopped the Commanders at the 5-yard line. They got the ball back in the fourth quarter. You're thinking, here we go. We're going to preserve the lead here, maybe churn some clock with Bucky Irving. But Mayfield gave the ball right back to the Commanders with that fumble on the handoff to McMillan. And the Commanders wasted no time in capitalizing on that and scoring on that fourth down play by Jaden Daniels to McLaurin. It seemed like Dan Quinn was hell-bent on having a scoring play on a fourth down last night. He was going for it on seemingly every opportunity that they had throughout this game. And if you're a Commanders fan, while, yes, you have grander plans, while you have brighter ideas in mind than just winning a wild card game against the Buccaneers, and are going to have an extremely difficult challenge coming up this weekend when you got to go to Ford Field and play the Detroit Lions. This is a team that, if you're a fan of a downtrodden franchise, whether it be my Jets, whether it be the Cleveland Browns, the Tennessee Titans, the Las Vegas Raiders, that's a team that you should look at as your inspiration there. The turnaround that they've had the last 2 years since purchasing this team, the group of Josh Harris and NBA Hall of Famer Magic Johnson, when they purchased this team from Daniel Snyder and then make good hires in the front office with general manager Adam Pierce, hired Dan Quinn as the head coach, and fell into Jaden Daniels at the second overall pick in this past year's draft. And you've watched his evolution this year, overcoming some rocky moments at times, including getting throttled by this same Bucs team on opening week. That should draw inspiration for any fan base, saying that, you know what, they were as miserable an organization as possible. They went almost 20 years without a playoff victory. It was something like over 6,900 days, something along that. They had gone without winning a postseason game. And to see that, to have them overcome that should draw inspiration for any fandom of sports. If your team is bad, your team's going through a rough time, you say, you know what, the Commanders had it as rough as anyone else. They were as ugly an organization as possible, and they've been able to turn it around. So why not us? Why can't we be that team that turns it around? And the Commanders will have their chance to continue this interesting ride, this fun ride coming up on Saturday night when they go to Ford Field to play the Lions. A weekend that on paper looks very appetizing, very good. Hopefully it's less sloppy than this past weekend, especially Saturday's games turned out to be. As you're going to have Texans-Chiefs at 4:30 on Saturday. Saturday night at 8 o'clock, it's Commanders at Lions. On Sunday, you'll get the winner of the Vikings-Rams in Philadelphia to play the Eagles. And then Sunday night closed out by Ravens-Bills. Can't get much better than that, people.
I'll be back.
In case any of you forgot, Major League Baseball's off-season is still going on. I know it's been a while, been about a minute since some moves were made, but typically around the holiday season, you start to see the general managers quiet down. About a week after the winter meetings, from Christmas up until about a week after the new year, you really don't see much action other than teams signing their players to their arbitration-eligible deals. And it's usually at around this time, some free agents available, but it's more of the guys that are willing to take the one-year deals, whether it's a deal to reprove themselves or if they're at the very end of their career and still just trying to hang on for another year. And we had one of those that came across as kind of surprising last week. But on the same front, I think it is a good move for both this team and this player, with the Giants signing Justin Verlander to a one-year, $15 million deal. He's going into his 20th year in the big leagues. He's 42 years old. And while he didn't do much last year due to some shoulder and neck issues and didn't pitch particularly well for the Houston Astros while he was healthy, he is going to a team that, yes, they lost Blake Snell in free agency to their division rival, the Dodgers, but is going to a ballpark in Oracle Park that's a dream for pitchers. It's one of the deepest fly ballparks in all of baseball. It's got a beautiful scenery. You don't typically get much bad weather there at all. And you're seeing that general manager Buster Posey is not just going to come in and ease his way into things. They made a big splash about a month ago in signing Willy Adames to a 7-year, $180 million deal. And need to do some more, though, to catch up to some of their division rivals as they finished fourth in what was probably the toughest division in all of baseball last year, that National League West. It's a good move. It's not a long-term move and could be Verlander's last year, but he doesn't want to go out on the sour note that last year was with the Houston Astros and wants to prove that he's as good as he ever was. Now, in all likelihood, you're not getting 30 to 32 starts out of him. You're probably, with his age, going to be more on capping him at around 25 starts this year. But I still think that there is, as long as he's healthy, something left in the tank for Verlander to go out there and compete. And there'll be plenty of time to get to baseball as we go along here. Plenty of time to give more thoughts with pitchers and catchers reporting in about a month's time. But there's still a lot of business at hand when it comes to football, with not just the NFL playoffs, but remember, we got the college football playoff going on right now, and we're now down to 2. We are now down to 2 teams set to play each other 1 week from tonight in Georgia for the national championship in the first ever 12-team college football playoff, as Notre Dame and Ohio State were able to get by the Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl respectively to get to this point. And it was not an easy road for either one of these teams, especially Notre Dame going up against a Penn State team that, yes, James Franklin is awful in big games. He's now 4-20 against teams ranked in the top 10. But Notre Dame didn't go out there and light them off offensively. At times, they had their own struggles, including losing Riley Leonard at the end of the second quarter for a drive, having to go to the backup. But he was able to give him a little bit of a jolt, a little bit of an energy during that time where there was a bit of a concussion scare for Riley Leonard. But he came back, led that offense down the field for a couple drives, made his own mistakes, was a little bit turnover prone there in the second half, including having a sequence in which he threw an interception in the fourth quarter that was sandwiched between two Penn State between two Penn State touchdowns. But in the end, showed a lot of resiliency, a lot of guts against Penn State. Like I said, battling an injury early on, and his defense was able to carry the way enough against Drew Aller, who, got to be honest there, that's going to be one of those moments that Drew Aller is thinking about all off-season long, that interception that he threw late in the game. Because at that point, you're backed up on your own 15-yard line. What are you doing slinging the ball across the middle of the field on the run like that? Just throw the football away. He tries to tell us that, he was trying to throw it toward the ground. Throw it 15 feet into the stands. What you do not do on that play, and we're talking about the Christian Gray interception. On that play, you do not throw it across your body into the middle of the field of play, trying to play Superman, trying to play hero ball. Because leading up to that, it's not like you were doing anything impressive. It's not like you were doing anything standout worthy. And Notre Dame's defense, outside of a couple of mistakes that Riley Leonard put him in bad spots on Thursday night, was humming for most of the night, was putting pressure on Drew Aller, was not allowing that Penn State offense to get going, was not allowing them to gain any real traction in this game. And you cost your team a chance to, at worst, fight it out in overtime. Even as stupid as college football's overtime is, you cost them a chance with that ill-advised throw in the middle of the field. And, you got to give this Irish team a lot of credit. Give Marcus Freeman a lot of credit. Because, yes, Notre Dame's fan base is as snobby and snooty as any fan base in all of sports. I'd put them right up there with Dallas Cowboy fans of the last 30 years, right up there along with, to be fair, Yankee fans since 2000, where they seemingly just think it's their God-given right to be at the top of the sport. And really have not been there outside of a couple of years here or there consistently since the late 80s. But he's made this team somewhat likable, which I never thought I'd say about a Notre Dame squad. And Notre Dame has very much taken advantage of the rules that work in their favor. Even though they got to go through 4 rounds of playoffs to win a national championship, look at the advantage that comes their way. Them not being in a conference, them being an independent, they're making $20 million off of being in this national championship now, with conferences receiving $4 million for each team that makes the college football playoff, $4 million for each team that makes it to the quarterfinals, $6 million for each team that reaches the semifinals, and then $6 million for each team that reaches the national championship. And Marcus Freeman even had a little something to say for James Franklin and his snide comments after the game when they were in the coach's handshake, telling him he didn't appreciate his nonsense about them not being in a conference. Something that, surprisingly, I actually agree with James Franklin on, but that's a story for another day. That's not something that you should be bringing up and providing as bulletin board material for your opposition leading into a big game like this, especially with how bad you've been in the big game. And now they're going to be going up against an Ohio State team next week that Ohio State has had the most pressure on them probably of any team in this playoff, especially their head coach Ryan Day, and has answered that challenge with a resounding beatdown after beatdown in the first 2 rounds against Indiana and Oregon, and then survived what looked like a duel at first between them and Texas, but their defense was just swarming Quinn Evers on Friday night. And I feel so bad for Quinn Evers that this is how his season comes to an end, where he's got the ball on the goal line with 2 minutes to go, looks like he's got a chance to tie up the game, and then fumbles on a hit by his former teammate Jack Sawyer, who took it back to the house for an 80-plus yard touchdown. That was just a tough pill to swallow for this kid, who has had to have felt the pressure of the world heaped on top of him since coming to Texas as a transfer from Ohio State. When you consider that there's always big expectations on anybody playing at Texas, and you add on top of it that the fact that everyone's always looking over his shoulder at the shiny prize prospect that is Arch Manning, and who's, since he was like a sophomore in high school, been hailed as the future of not just college football, but the future of football in general. People seemingly looking for every opportunity to throw slings and arrows at Quinn Evers, wanting him to be benched in favor of Arch Manning. He's always got all of this heaping down on him, and he goes out there and does nothing but perform, get his team in a place where they're on the doorstep of the college football playoff finals. But unfortunately, he has a heartbreaking moment against a team that has looked like a juggernaut so far through this playoff. And now we head to next Monday, Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the national championship for the title in the first ever 12-team college football playoff. Both teams had to go through 4 rounds of playoffs. When it's all said and done, are going to have to play a total of 16, 17 games here, more than any college team has ever had to play in their history. And whoever wins this is going to truly have earned it. And what's weird, and I never thought I'd say this, it feels like most of the country, unless I'm reading things wrong, most of the country is on Notre Dame's side. And when did you ever think you'd hear that?
I'll be back.
Well, if you're a fan of an NFL team, a team that was looking to draft a quarterback in this coming year's NFL draft, one less option just became possible for you, as to most people's surprise and kind of an off-the-radar thing, something that didn't even cross my mind until it came out over the weekend. Carson Beck, the quarterback at Georgia, has used the transfer portal to move to Miami to play for the Hurricanes next year, which was surprising on one front because he had already declared for the draft about a month ago, figured that he was going to be probably a late first round, maybe early second round draft pick, possibly the first quarterback taken after Shadir Sanders and Cam Ward. But he did end the season with an elbow injury, an injury that is going to sideline him from throwing through spring practices in March, and now moves to a Hurricanes team that is losing Cam Ward to the draft this coming April, was in search for their new quarterback. The only guy that they had left on the roster was sophomore Amari Williams, and I don't think Mario Cristobal wanted to stick with him because Miami has grander plans. This was a disappointing end of the year for Miami. Losing at the end of the season, costing them a shot at being in the college football playoff after being so dominant for most of the year. And then having to participate in the Pop-Tart Bowl against Iowa State. They were looking for a better quarterback option, and they just found it now with getting Carson Beck, who, they had to hand over $4 million to get him, but I think they'll say that was well worth it. And if you're Carson Beck, look, you're making more money at Miami next year through these NIL deals than a large majority of the quarterbacks are making on their guaranteed deals next year. He's making more guaranteed money next year than the likes of CJ Stroud, than the likes of Caleb Williams, of Jaden Daniels. Yeah, they got paid at their signing bonuses, but $4 million to play for Miami, pretty sweet deal. And one of those teams that could be looking for a quarterback, but they'll be in position to draft either Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders, whoever isn't drafted first overall, is the Cleveland Browns, who now are facing quarterback uncertainty, facing, should we say, potential quarterback hell now. With, in all likelihood, they're going to be without Deshaun Watson next season. And I had mentioned this last week. The news had just started trickling out. We weren't quite sure at the time what was going to be the future of Deshaun Watson, as the Browns general manager, Andrew Berry, had come out and said that he had had a setback, but didn't really give any specifics on how bad the setback was. But we found out over the weekend that Deshaun Watson had a second surgery on Thursday for his right Achilles tendon. The same Achilles tendon that he originally tore back in October, he retore it at some point over the holiday season, said that he rolled his ankle, and when he went to see the team for end-of-year physicals, told the team physician that. But now what we're coming to find out, some interesting news, is that there's some video out there swarming around social media that Deshaun Watson might have been out and about without the walking boot on. Might have been out there without the protective boot that was mandated in this recovery from the torn Achilles. Even might have been dancing around a club with the boot off. And if you're the Browns, considering how he seemingly has given you nothing, you've gotten all of 19 starts out of him, a guy that you gave up so many first-round draft picks for, gave him $230 million guaranteed. Yes, some will say it looks bad to try to fight to get that money back. But with how ugly it's been with him there and the fact that you've gotten nothing out of him, I definitely would fight to get that money back, especially if he was caught without the walking boot on and was caught doing things that he probably shouldn't have been doing during the rehab process. Even if he's ready to play, say by next December, I think it's best for Deshaun Watson to sit out all of it next year. I know they said that the rehab and recovery time could be 7 months, but he needs a mental rehabilitation year. Deshaun Watson needs to grow the hell up, because you want to see how to quickly throw away an NFL career. Deshaun Watson is doing it at each and every turn. Well, the biggest known secret in the NFL finally came to light over the weekend as on Sunday morning, the New England Patriots hired Mike Vrabel as their new head coach. I said it last week to friends of mine who are Jet fans. I said it last week on the podcast. The Patriots wasted all of our time. They wasted the time of the likes of Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton by bringing them in for interviews just to suffice the Rooney Rule. They should have had this announcement last Wednesday, because as soon as Gerard Mayo got fair or unfair fired after one season, you knew this was the route that they were going to go in. This was a guy that was a leader on their team from 2001 to 2008, was an integral part of them winning 3 championships, was a winner at Tennessee where he took the Titans to the playoffs 5 out of the 6 years he was there. And I still to this day think that the only reason he was fired after last season was because their owner was mad at him going back to New England during his bye week to get inducted in the Patriots Hall of Fame and having such glowing remarks. Remember, during that speech, he said, quote, "This is a special place with great leadership, great fans, great direction, and great coaching. It's not like this everywhere." And the Titans got their feelings hurt, felt that was a shot at them, and decided to move on. And their loss is going to be New England's gain. Because here now you're bringing in a guy that is a true CEO type as far as a head coach. There's going to be no BSing around allowed. He has had success in this league, knows what it takes to get the job done. Remember, he's been to the playoffs with a meh quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. He's won playoff games with that guy as his quarterback. And now he goes to New England where he had so much success and is going to try to reprise that success as their head coach. Definitely makes things more difficult for my New York Jets, but I figured the writing was on the wall as soon as Gerard Mayo got fired and this job was open. So that's why it wasn't too heartbroken. I just thought it was kind of annoying that they strung some people along through the process and insulted everybody's intelligence with how long they waited to make this move. Now, if I'm the Jets, you've interviewed everybody under the sun, seemingly, for both your head coach opening and your general manager opening. The last person in the world I want to hear as far as getting this job is Rex Ryan. That would be steps backwards, and that would just be making this a best friends club. You need a disciplinarian. You need somebody that's going to come in and put his foot down from day one and say, this BS is not going to be accepted. The Jets were top 5, or if you want to view it as the worst way, bottom 5 in the league when it comes to penalties. And most of those were pre-snap penalties. Most of those were inexcusable penalties. And you can't allow that to continue on. You need to install some discipline. You need to install some kind of leadership, some kind of culture in here rather than the slop and the mess it's continued to be year after year. And to me, there are really 2 names that could fit that mold. One is Brian Flores, who I'm surprised we haven't heard his name come up yet in the coaching interview cycle for the Jets. Seemingly, they've interviewed everyone. Why hasn't he been brought in? And the other one is Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. The only thing I would worry about with Aaron Glenn is I have the same feelings that I had with Robert Saleh 4 years ago when he was hired, where I was very impressed by him from afar. But I don't want him to come here and change anything about himself, going from defensive coordinator to now head coach. He's got to come in here with that same strong mindset, that same leader's mindset, and be willing to put his foot down from day one. and not allow any of the crap that was going on anymore. First move that they should definitely make when you get a general manager and head coach in here, get Michael Clemens out of the building. That was the defensive player I'm talking about before, who's constantly making post-play all about made business decision moves and constantly getting into fights with teams like Deion Dawkins from the Bills that are proven to ultimately be costly. They cannot get this wrong. They need to get both the general manager and head coach opening for this team correct. Otherwise, you're looking at another 5 to 6 years of more of the same nonsense with the Jets. It's been 14 years since they made the playoffs. Can this please, I'm begging them, please end at some point? Really? Am I going to really go through my 30s without a Jet playoff appearance? And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, January 13th, 2025. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You got one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.